Sound note, very faint wind outside, followed by the heavy, satisfying thud click of a large oak door closing. Silence. Then the slow ticking of a grandfather clock. Narrator, welcome. Coming out of the noise. Close the heavy oak door behind you. Let the world outside simply fade away. You have arrived at the Museum of Words. It is quiet here, the kind of quiet that feels like a soft blanket. The air smells of old paper, leather bindings, and polished wood. The lights are dim, casting long, golden shadows across the floorboards. This is a place where language lives, not in dictionaries or textbooks, but in the objects that gave birth to it. We are going to take a long, slow walk together. We have hours. There is no rush, no destination we must reach, just a wandering path through history. Follow me down this hallway. Notice the dust motes dancing in the beam of light from the high transom window. We are walking toward the first heavy curtain. It is made of velvet, deep red and heavy. Pull it back and step through. Sound note, the ticking clock fades, replaced by a subtle, hollow room tone, stone walls, a faint crackle of a fireplace in the distance. Narrator, the floor here changes to cold, uneven flagstone. We are in the medieval room. The ceiling is high and vaulted, lost in the shadows above. To your left, there is a long, heavy wooden table set for a banquet. It is rough-hewn timber, scarred by knives and time. Walk toward it. Run your hand along the wood. Imagine the feast that once happened here. The noise, the music, the firelight. Look closely at the bread sitting on the table. It is a round, dark loaf, baked hard in a wood-fired oven. In the days of lords and ladies, the bread was not just food. It was a hierarchy. The bottom of the loaf, sitting directly on the oven floor, would often get burnt or covered in ash. This was given to the servants. But the top of the loaf, the part that rose high, golden, and crisp, protected from the ash, that piece was sliced off carefully. It was reserved only for the most important person at the table, the lord, the king, the guest of honor. It was the upper crust. Pause. Even now, when we speak of the elite, the highest society, we call them the upper crust. It isn't about money. It is about that golden, perfect slice of bread sitting right here on this wooden board. Move further down the room. There is a smaller table here, set between two high-backed chairs near the fireplace. On the table is a game board. It looks like backgammon. The pieces are ivory and ebony. In the Middle Ages, people played a game very similar to this. Imagine two players locked in a battle of wits. One is winning, confident, their pieces dominating the board. But then a roll of the dice, a shift in strategy. The board is physically turned, or the advantage swings so violently that the winning player is suddenly on the defense. They would quite literally turn the tables. Now look into the corner. There is a suit of armor standing guard. Next to it, leaning against the wall, is a long lance, the weapon of a knight. Most knights served a specific lord. They pledged their loyalty to one castle, one banner. But look at this lance. It has no banner. It is unadorned. This belonged to a mercenary knight, a warrior who had no master. He was free to offer his lance to whichever cause paid the best or suited his morals. He was a free lance, Today, writers and artists who work for themselves are freelancers. But the spirit of the word stands right here, a warrior with a weapon, free to choose his own battle. Let us leave the stone walls behind. There is a breeze coming from the next archway. Sound note, the fire crackles out. A slow fade of creaking wood like a hull, the distant cry of a seagull, and the rhythmic washing of waves against wood. Narrator, the air instantly changes. It is cooler here. Can you smell it? Salt, tar, damp hemp. We are in the nautical room. The floor is made of wide, weathered planks that creak softly under your feet. It feels as though the room itself is gently swaying. We are surrounded by the skeletons of old ships. Masts rise up toward the ceiling. Ropes hang like vines. Walk over to the ship's wheel. It is massive, polished by the hands of 1,000 helmsmen. Look at the ropes controlling the sails. In the language of the sea, a rope that controls the bottom corner of a sail is called a sheet. It isn't the canvas. It is the line that holds it. Imagine a storm. The wind is howling. The captain loses control. One of the ropes, the sheet, snaps loose. The sail flaps wildly. Then a second sheet snaps. Then a third. With 3 sheets to the wind, the ship creates a chaotic, staggering motion. It wobbles and lists, unable to walk a straight line. When we see someone staggering home from the pub today, unsteady on their feet, we say they are 3 sheets to the wind. It is the memory of a ship without control, tossing in the waves. Pause. Move to the captain's desk. It is a small, slanted surface. There is a piece of dark slate lying there, next to a piece of chalk. This is the ship's log. During a watch, the officer would note down the speed, the wind, and the course on this slate using the chalk. It was temporary. When a watch was over and the new officer came on deck to take charge, they would take a wet cloth and wipe the slate clean. They would erase the errors, the shifts, and the history of the last 4 hours. They would start their shift with a clean slate. Pause. Walk past the hammock. See the large wooden barrel standing near the mast? It is a water butt. On long voyages, the sailors had nowhere to go. No news from the outside world. So when they were thirsty, they would gather around this water, but to drink. They would lean against it, cup in hand, and talk. They would trade rumors, gossip, and complaints about the captain. It was the office water cooler of the 1700s. The rumors that started here were called scuttlebutt, because the barrel was a butt, and scuttle meant it had a hole for the cup. Today, when we ask for the gossip, we are asking for the scuttlebutt. The salt air is fading now. We are moving toward a warmer, earthier smell. Sound note, the waves fade. The sound of wind through tall grass. Distant cowbell. The low hum of cicadas. Narrator, step through the barn doors. The light here is golden, like late afternoon sun filtering through dust and hay. This is the farm room. It smells of dried grass, sweet feed, and leather. To your right, there is a stall. A horse is waiting there, or the memory of one. In the days of trade, a horse was a valuable asset. But how could you tell how old a horse was? You couldn't ask for a birth certificate. You had to look at its teeth. As a horse ages, its gums recede, and the shape of the teeth changes. The savvy buyer would always pull back the horse's lips to check its age and health. But imagine you were given a horse as a present, gift. To pull back its lips and check its teeth in front of the giver would be rude. It would imply you were checking the value of the generosity. You simply accepted it. You did not look a gift horse in the mouth. Pause. Walk past the plow. See the sacks of grain stacked against the wall. Look closely at the ears of the livestock portrayed in this painting on the wall. Do you see the small notches cut into the ears of the sheep? Before plastic tags or microchips, the farmer needed a way to prove which animal belonged to him, especially if they grazed on common land. He would take a knife and cut a specific pattern, a mark, into the ear. That sheep was earmarked for a specific owner. Today, when we set aside money for a holiday or designate a project for a specific team, we say it has been earmarked. We are mentally cutting a notch in it, claiming it for a specific purpose. Pause. We are coming to the end of the barn. There is a pile of soft, dried grass here. Bed of hay. In the old farmhouses, the mattresses were not made of memory foam or springs. They were large sacks of ticking fabric, stuffed with straw or hay from the barn. At the end of a long, hard day of labor in the fields, you wouldn't just go to bed. You would literally go to the mattress. You would collapse onto the rustling, sweet-smelling grass. You would hit the hay. Sound note, the farm sounds fade. Return to the quiet, dusty silence of the museum, but softer now. A slow, rhythmic breathing pattern in the audio. Narrator, the tour is pausing here. The museum of words is vast. There are rooms we haven't seen yet. The industrial room, the room of theater, the room of technology. But they will wait. The words have survived for centuries. They can wait for tomorrow. For now, take a moment to stand in the quiet. Feel the weight of the history you have walked through. The bread, the ships, the hay. You carry this museum with you every time you speak. Rest now. The doors are closing gently. The lights are dimming. Good night. Sound note, fade to silence. Sound note, the ambient farm sounds fade completely. Silence. Then the slow rhythmic sound of footsteps on a polished marble floor. A very faint, distant mechanical clicking like a clock or a press. Narrator, leave the warmth of the barn behind you now. Step back into the cool, dim corridor of the museum. The air here is still. It feels timeless. As you walk, the floor changes beneath your feet. The rough wood gives way to smooth, polished stone. We are moving away from the fields and the sea and moving toward the city, toward the places where ideas were built and where stories were told. To your left, there is a door with a frosted glass pane. The smell of oil, sharp chemicals, and heavy paper seeps from beneath it. You can hear a rhythmic clank, whoosh-a-clank. Open the door. Sound note, a mechanical rhythm fades in, the heavy, hypnotic sound of a manual printing press. The shuffling of paper. The sound of metal clicking against metal. Narrator, welcome to the print shop. The room is cluttered and busy, yet strangely peaceful. It is filled with rows of wooden cabinets, drawer upon drawer, reaching up to the ceiling. The air smells of ink, acrid and dark, and the dust of paper fibers. In the center of the room sits the iron press. It is a beast of black metal resting now, but imagine it in motion. The heavy lever pulled, the paper pressed down onto the inked letters. Walk over to the tall wooden cabinets against the wall. These are the compositor's cases. This is where the letters live. Before computers, before typewriters, every single letter on a page had to be picked up by hand. A tiny piece of metal with a raised A or B or C. Look at how the cases are arranged. There are two large wooden trays, one sitting above the other on a slanted rack. The tray on the bottom held the letters used most often, small letters. This was easy for the printer to reach. The tray on the top, harder to reach, held the capital letters. When a printer needed a capital letter, he had to reach up to the uppercase. When he needed a small letter, he reached down to the lowercase. We still use these terms every day to describe our text. But they are not abstract concepts. They are physical boxes sitting right here in this room, waiting for a hand to reach into them. Pause. Now look at the printer's workbench. It is scattered with tiny metal letters. Imagine the printer is working fast. He is pulling letters from the cases to form a sentence. He grabs a handful of E's, then A's. But sometimes the supply runs out. The specific compartment for the letter E is empty. He checks the others. This is gone. These individual metal letters were called sorts. If the printer ran out of the letters he needed, he couldn't finish the page. He would be frustrated, stuck, unable to work. He was literally out of sorts. Today, when we feel grumpy or not quite ourselves, we say we are out of sorts. We are like a printer who has reached into the box and found nothing there. Pause. One last stop in this room. Look at the finished page drying on the rack. It is a solid block of text. Sometimes, to save time, a printer would take a whole page of loose letters and cast them into a single solid metal plate. This meant they could print the same page thousands of times without resetting the letters. This solid metal plate was called a stereotype, a fixed image, unchanging, repeated over and over again without variation. When we call a person or a character a stereotype, we are saying they are just a solid plate, incapable of change, printed from a mold. The clanking of the press is fading now. Let us move through the back door. There is a velvet curtain ahead. Sound note, the industrial sounds vanish. The air becomes dead silent, acoustically treated silence. Then the faint sound of an orchestra tuning up in the very far distance. The squeak of floorboards. Narrator, step through the curtain. The air here is thick and dry. It smells of old makeup powder, costumes, and the heat of electric lamps. We are backstage in an old Victorian theater. We are standing in the wings, looking out at the stage. The theater is empty, but the ghost of the audience is out there in the dark. Look at the lighting rig above the stage. Before electricity was common, theaters used a very specific type of spotlight. They burned a block of calcium quicklime in a jet of oxygen and hydrogen flame. It produced a brilliant, blinding white light. It was dangerous, but it was the only way to highlight the main star on the stage. If you were the lead actor, you wanted to be standing in that beam. You wanted to be in the limelight. Pause. Now walk out onto the stage itself. Feel the wood beneath your feet. Notice that the floor is not flat. It is slanted. The back of the stage is higher than the front of the stage. We call this a raked stage. This is why in theater directions, walking away from the audience is walking upstage and walking toward the audience is walking downstage. Imagine two actors performing a scene. The main actor is standing downstage, close to the audience, but the second actor wants to steal the attention. So the second actor walks upstage to the higher ground behind the main actor. To look at him, the main actor has to turn his back to the audience. The second actor now commands the full attention of the crowd. He has literally upstaged him. Pause. Come back into the wings. There is a small, cozy room just off the corridor where the actors wait before they go on. In the 1600s and 1700s, this waiting room was often painted a soothing color to help the actors relax their eyes after being under the bright stage lights or the candlelight. It was a place of calm. They painted it green. Even today, in television studios and concert halls, the room where the talent waits is called the green room. Let us leave the theater before the curtain rises. There is a small door here that leads to a warmer, more familiar place. Sound note, the dry theater air shifts. The sound of a crackling fire, much closer now. The sound of a heavy pot being set on a wooden table. A very faint wind howling outside, making the inside feel safer. Narrator, you are now in the kitchen. But this is not a modern kitchen. There is no hum of a refrigerator. Just the heat of a massive stone fireplace that takes up an entire wall. This is the heart of the home. The table is set. It is a long, heavy oak table. In the days of Shakespeare, honesty was valued at the dinner table. If you were playing cards or making a deal, you kept your hands visible. You kept them above the table, where everyone could see them. If you put your hands under the table, you were hiding something. You were cheating. To be honest, to be open, was to be above board. Pause. Walk over to the pantry. It is cool in here. There are shelves of preserved meats and cheeses. Hospitality was a serious obligation in history. If a guest arrived at your door, you fed them. But what if a guest stayed too long? What if you wanted them to leave, but you couldn't be rude enough to kick them out? You would change the menu. When a guest first arrived, you served them a hot, fresh roast, steaming from the fire. But after a few days, when they came to the table, you would serve them the leftovers. You would serve them the shoulder of mutton cold, straight from the pantry. You gave them the cold shoulder. It was a polite culinary hint that it was time to move on. Pause. Look at the pot hanging over the fire. It is made of iron. Making these pots was difficult. If the ironsmith made a mistake, or if the iron was low quality, the pot would develop cracks. To hide the cracks, a dishonest smith might fill them with wax. It looked perfect when you bought it. But the moment you put it over the fire, the wax would melt, and the pot would leak. So a smart buyer would look for a pot that was sin sera, Latin for without wax. Some say this is the origin of the word sincere. To be sincere is to be solid, true, and without hidden cracks filled with wax. Sound note, the fire fades. Return to the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock from the very beginning. The feeling of heavy, safe silence. Narrator, we are back in the main hall now. The tour is ending for today. The print shop is silent. The theater is dark. The kitchen fire has banked down to glowing embers. You have walked through centuries in just a few minutes. You have touched the lead letters, stood in the limelight, and sat at the oak table. These words belong to you now. They are not just phrases. They are memories of places you have been. The museum will always be here, open and waiting whenever you need a quiet place to wander. For now, let your eyes close. Let the dust settle. Good night. Sound note. The clock ticking slows down, getting quieter and quieter until it fades into total silence. Sound note. The crackle of the kitchen fire fades. Silence returns, but it is softer now, dampened by heavy fabrics. The sound of footsteps on a thick, woven runner. Narrator, the fire has warmed us. Now let us move deeper into the house of history. Walk down this corridor. Notice the walls. They are not bare stone anymore. They are covered in heavy tapestries, woven scenes of hunts, of forests, of stars. The air here smells different. It smells of raw wool, lanolin, and dry flax. It is a clean, fibrous smell. Listen, do you hear that? A rhythmic, repetitive sound. Click-clack, swoosh, click-clack. It is the heartbeat of the pre-industrial world. Push open the double doors. Sound note, the rhythmic sound of a wooden loom, hypnotic and steady. The spinning of a wheel. A soft, tactile atmosphere. Narrator, we are in the textile room. The light is soft here, filtered through high windows to protect the fabrics from the sun. The room is filled with looms, spinning wheels, and baskets of raw cotton and wool. Walk over to the spinning wheel in the corner. Imagine the person sitting there. Hour after hour, foot in the treadle, hands feeding the fiber. It was monotonous work. To pass the time, the spinners would talk. They would tell stories. Long, winding stories that went on, just like the thread they were creating. They were literally spinning a yarn. Today, when someone tells a long, perhaps slightly exaggerated story, we say they are spinning a yarn. The phrase comes from the rhythm of this wheel, turning fiber into fiction. Pause. Move to the center of the room. Look at the long wooden frames stretching across the tables. After wool was woven into cloth, it had to be cleaned and fulled, thickened. But then it had to be dried carefully so it didn't shrink. The wet cloth was stretched out on these large wooden frames. Along the edges of the frames were sharp metal hooks used to grip the fabric and pull it tight. These frames were called tinters, and the hooks were tenor hooks. Imagine the fabric stretched tight, under tension, waiting to dry. When we are nervous, waiting for news, suspended in a state of anxiety, we say we are on tenterhooks. We are like the cloth, stretched taut, waiting for the result. Pause. Look at the table near the window. There is a bundle of raw flax here, tough, stringy plant fibers. Beside it is a tool that looks like a brush with frighteningly sharp iron teeth. This tool is a heckle. To make the flax useful, you had to pull it through the iron teeth of the heckle over and over again. It was a rough, violent process to separate the good fiber from the waste. This process was called heckling. In the 19th century, the labor movement adopted the word. When workers shouted questions at politicians, trying to tease out the truth, trying to separate the good answers from the bad, they were said to be heckling. Now, when a comedian is shouted at by an audience member, the memory of that sharp iron comb is still there. The rhythm of the loom is soothing, but let us step out into the fresh air. Sound note, the loom fades. Crossfade to the sound of a gentle breeze cobblestones, and the distant, indistinct murmur of a crowd. The clip-clop of a horse. Bell ringing. Narrator, step through the archway. The ceiling opens up to the sky. We are in the marketplace. It is an old town square, paved with cobblestones. Stalls are set up with striped awnings. The air smells of spices, fresh bread, and animals. This is where commerce began. This is where trust was tested. Walk over to the baker's stall. The smell of yeast is intoxicating. In medieval England, the laws governing the weight of bread were incredibly strict. If a baker sold a loaf that was lighter than the law allowed, he could be whipped, fined, or put in the pillory. Bakers were terrified of accidentally selling a light loaf. The dough might shrink in the oven, the scale might be off. So to be absolutely safe, when a customer ordered a dozen rolls, 12, the baker would throw in one extra. Just in case. He gave 13 for the price of 12. It was the baker's dozen. An insurance policy against a public flogging. Pause. Walk past the baker to the livestock trader. There are sacks and bags piled here. In these days, you didn't have plastic wrap. You bought things in burlap sacks. A small sack was called a poke. A dishonest trader might try to sell you a piglet, a valuable animal. He would show you the wriggling bag. The pig is inside, he would say. But if you didn't check, if you bought the bag without opening it, you might get home and find a worthless stray cat inside. You had bought a pig in a poke. But if you were smart, if you opened the sack right there in the market to check, the cat would jump out. You would literally let the cat out of the bag. You revealed the secret trick. Pause. Finally, look at the merchant counting coins at the small table. He holds a gold coin up to his ear and drops it on the table. Clink. He is checking if it is real gold or a fake. In ancient Rome, soldiers were often paid not in gold, but in a resource that was just as valuable. It was used to preserve food and keep people alive. Salt. The allowance of salt money given to a soldier was called his salarium. It is where we get the word salary. If a soldier was lazy or did a poor job, he wasn't earning his keep. He wasn't worth his salt. Leave the noise of the market now. There is a green iron gate in the corner of the square. It leads to a quiet place. Sound note, the market sounds fade completely, replaced by the sound of rustling leaves, birdsong, a thrush, a sparrow, and the trickling of a fountain. Narrator, push the gate open. It creaks on old hinges. We are in the garden. The walls of the city are gone. Here it is just green hedges, blooming roses, and ancient trees. The air is sweet and cool. Walk toward the dense thicket of bushes near the wall. Hiding deep inside those bushes are birds. In the days of hunting, before shotguns, men hunted with nets and sticks. But they couldn't reach the birds hiding deep in the thorns. So they hired people to hit the bushes with sticks to thrash around the edges. This would scare the birds into the air, where they could be caught. These helpers were beating around the bush. They were doing the preliminary work, circling the main event, but not going straight to the center. When we talk in circles today, avoiding the main point, we are beating around the bush. Pause. Walk further down the gravel path. Look at the rose garden. See this small rose bush? It has a tiny green growth on the stem, a bud. If this bud is healthy, it will turn into a flower. But if the gardener sees a disease or a pest on that tiny bud, he reaches out with his shears. Snip. He removes the problem while it is still small, before it has a chance to grow into a large, thorny issue. He has nipped it in the bud. Pause. Finally, come to the edge of the pond. The water is still, reflecting the clouds. There is a swan gliding across the water. Silent, majestic. The ancient Greeks believed that the swan was silent for its entire life, but they believed that in the very last moments before it died, the swan would sing one incredibly beautiful, haunting song. It was a myth, of course. Swans don't actually do this, but the poetry of the idea survived. When a musician performs their final concert, or a politician gives their final speech before retiring, we call it their swan song. It is the final, beautiful act before the silence returns. Sound note, the bird song quiets down. A gentle wind chimes sound. The feeling of twilight settling in. Narrator, there is a stone bench here, facing the pond. Sit down. The tour for this hour is complete. We have spun yarn, walked the market, and rested in the garden. The Museum of Words stretches on. There are rooms for science, for sports, for astronomy. But you do not need to see them all today. The words will wait for you. Feel the support of the bench beneath you. Watch the ripples on the pond slow down and stop. Breathe in the quiet. Good night. Sound note, slow fade to silence over 30 seconds. Sound note, the gentle bird song of the garden fades. It is replaced by the sound of wind chimes made of glass, delicate and tinkling. Footsteps on a tiled floor that echoes slightly, like a quiet hospital or a research hall. Narrator, rise from the stone bench in the garden. The sun is setting now, casting long purple shadows across the grass. We are moving back indoors, but into a different wing of the museum. Walk through the glass doors. The air here is crisp, cool, and smells faintly of camphor, rubbing alcohol, and dried herbs. It is a clean, sharp smell that clears the mind. The walls are lined with shelves, and the shelves are filled with jars. Amber glass, cobalt blue, clear crystal. This is the wing of science. This is where we tried to understand the body, and then the universe. Step into the first room. The floorboards creak with a dry, ancient sound. Sound note, the sound of a mortar and pestle grinding, a gritty, rhythmic stone-on-stone sound. The clink of glass bottles being moved. The bubbling of a small pot over a flame. Narrator, we are in the apothecary. It is dim here. The only light comes from the glow of jars filled with strange liquids and the small fire on the workbench. Walk to the counter. It is stained with the spills of 100 years of mixing. In the old days, medicine was not a refined pill you swallowed with water. It was often a thick, foul-tasting paste or a bitter liquid derived from bark and roots. Doctors and apothecaries knew that patients, especially children, would refuse to take it. The taste was simply too repulsive. So they developed a trick. They would take the bitter medicine and dip it in sugar or honey. They would coat the outside to hide the terrible taste inside. They literally sugar-coated it. Today, when we deliver bad news but try to make it sound pleasant, we are doing the exact same thing. We are the apothecary, dipping the bitter truth in sweet words. Pause. Look at the small ceramic bowl on the table. Inside, there is a large, hard pill. In the medieval era, pills were not small. They were often large boluses of compressed herbs. Swallowing one was difficult. It required effort. It made you gag. But sometimes there was no sugar coating. You simply had to do it. You had to accept the unpleasant reality to get the cure. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Pause. Move to the back of the room. There is a shelf labeled with names of people. In the 1800s, quack doctors would travel from town to town selling miracle cures, snake oil, tonics. Sometimes a person would fall for the scam. They would buy the fake medicine only to get sick. But occasionally, the scammer himself would fall ill. And the townspeople, tired of his lies, would force him to drink his own vile concoction. They would force him to experience the fraud he was selling to others. He got a taste of his own medicine. The air here is heavy with herbs. Let us move to a place of cleaner, sharper air. Sound note, the grinding sounds fade, replaced by the hum of electricity, a faint Tesla coil sound, the bubbling of beakers, and the sharp scratch of a quill on paper. Narrator, push through the swinging doors. The lighting changes. It is brighter here, the cool blue light of early experimentation. We are in the laboratory. There are slate tables covered in beakers, coils of copper wire, and measuring tools. Look at the jewelry box sitting on the workbench. It is open. Inside, there is a piece of gold. For centuries, alchemists and jewelers needed a way to prove that gold was real. There are many metals that look like gold, brass, pyrite. But there is one substance that cannot be fooled. Nitric acid. If you drop nitric acid on fake gold, it bubbles and turns green. It destroys the illusion. But if you drop it on real gold, nothing happens. The gold shines on, unaffected. This was the ultimate proof, the final check. It was the acid test. Pause. Walk over to the far wall. There is a blueprint pinned up. It shows a diagram of an atom. In physics, electrons move around a nucleus in specific orbits. For an electron to move from one orbit to another, it doesn't travel in the space between. It simply disappears from here and appears there. It is a sudden, discontinuous jump. A leap? Scientists call this a quantum leap. Originally, it meant the smallest possible movement of a particle. But because it was such a fundamental change in state, the public misunderstood it. Today, when we make a huge breakthrough, a massive improvement, we call it a quantum leap. We took a term for the tiny and made it gigantic. Pause. Look at the desk in the corner. There is a stack of papers and a trash can overflowing with crumpled drafts. Thomas Edison, the great inventor, worked in a lab like this. He failed thousands of times before he perfected the light bulb. When an experiment failed, he would clear the table. He would take the drafting board, the drawing board, wipe it clean, and start again. He went back to the drawing board. The smell of ozone and chemicals is strong. Let us go up. There is a spiral staircase in the center of the room. It is made of iron. Climb it. Sound note, the lab sounds fade. The sound of wind howling softly outside a dome. The mechanical whir of a telescope gear turning. A sense of vast, open space. Narrator, climb higher. The air gets colder. We are at the top of the tower. The ceiling is a dome, open to the night sky. We are in the observatory. In the center is a massive brass telescope, pointed at the heavens. Look through the eyepiece. In ancient times, before we understood gravity or physics, people believed that the stars controlled our fate. If a tragedy occurred, it was because the stars were in a bad position. The word disaster actually comes from the Latin. Dis means bad or apart. Aster means star. A disaster is literally a bad star. Pause. Look at the calendar on the wall. It tracks the phases of the moon. Usually, there is one full moon in a month. But the lunar cycle is shorter than our calendar month. So every 2 or 3 years, a strange thing happens. We get a second full moon in the same calendar month. It is a rare event. It doesn't happen often. The old almanacs would print this second moon in a different color ink, often blue, to distinguish it. So when something happens very rarely, we say it happens once in a blue moon. Pause. Step out onto the balcony. The wind is brisk here. Look up at the Milky Way. Sailors and travelers use the stars to navigate. If the clouds covered the stars, they were lost. They were grateful when the sky cleared. They would look up, find the North Star, and offer their thanks. They would thank their lucky stars. Sound note, the wind settles. The quiet hum of the night returns. A slow, deep cello note begins to play. Narrator, sit in the leather chair by the telescope. The universe is vast, but language helps us bring it down to earth. We hold the stars in our mouths every time we speak of disasters or lunacy, the madness of the moon. You have traveled from the apothecary's jar to the edge of the galaxy in 30 minutes. Rest now. The stars are watching. The museum is quiet. Good night. Sound note, fade to silence. Sound note, the wind of the observatory fades. The sound of footsteps descending a metal spiral staircase, a rhythmic, ringing sound. Then the heavy thud of landing on a thick carpet. Narrator, leave the stars behind. Come down the long spiral staircase. Your hand glides along the cold iron railing. Down, down, back toward the earth. We are leaving the realm of pure science and entering the realm of human nature. Risk, competition, and the drive to move forward. At the bottom of the stairs, there is a heavy door made of mahogany. It is polished to a deep shine. Even before you open it, you can hear the faint murmur of voices and the shuffling of stiff paper cards. Go inside. Sound note, a low smoky jazz bass or a slow ticking clock. The distinct riffle of playing cards. The clicking of chips or coins. Narrator, we are in the gaming parlor. The lights are low, hanging in green glass shades over round felt tables. The air is thick with the imaginary smoke of cigars and concentration. Walk to the center table. A game of poker is in progress. Look at the object sitting in front of the dealer. It is a knife with a handle made of deer antler buckhorn. In the old Wild West saloons, the dealer changed with every hand to keep things fair. To track whose turn it was to deal, the players would pass a marker around the table. Often, it was this knife the buck. If you didn't want the responsibility of dealing, if you didn't want the blame for a bad hand, you would push the knife to the next player. You would pass the buck. Pause. Harry S. Truman, the American president, kept a sign on his desk that said, "The buck stops here." It meant he could no longer pass the knife. The responsibility was his alone. Pause. Watch the players. One of them is holding a winning hand. He has the ace, the king, the queen. He is excited. But look at his face. It is completely blank. If he smiles, the other players will fold, and he won't win as much money. If he looks nervous, they might bluff him. So he freezes his muscles. He betrays no emotion. He is wearing a poker face. Pause. Now watch the player across from him. This player is cheating. He is wearing a coat with wide sleeves. Hidden inside the cuff of his shirt, tucked against his wrist, is a card he slipped off the table earlier. An ace. He is waiting for the perfect moment to drop it into his hand. He has an ace up his sleeve. Pause. The game ends. The cards are gathered up. The dealer shuffles them, a chaotic mess of suits and numbers. But then he begins to lay them out. He places a heart, then another heart, a spade, then another spade. He is organizing the chaos. He is making the cards follow a pattern. When we are in a meeting or a social situation and we see someone else do something, we often do the same thing. We copy their behavior. We follow suit. Leave the tension of the card table. Let's move through the double doors at the back. Sound note, the quiet clicking of the parlor shifts to a hollow, echoing room tone. The smell of rosin and old leather. The rhythmic thud-thud-thud of a speed bag in the distance. Narrator, the air here is different. It smells of sweat, wintergreen oil, and leather. We are in the gymnasium. Specifically, the boxing ring. In the center of the room stands a raised square platform, surrounded by ropes. Climb the steps. Duck through the ropes. Stand on the canvas. Imagine a fighter here. He has been fighting for 10 rounds. He is exhausted. His vision is blurry. He is trapped against the ropes, leaning back, using them to hold himself up because his legs are too weak to stand. He is defenseless. He is literally on the ropes. Pause. The opponent moves in for the final strike. The exhausted fighter is about to fall. But then, Lang, the gong sounds. The round is over. The referee steps in. The fight stops immediately. The exhausted fighter gets 1 minute to sit down, drink water, and recover. He was seconds away from losing, but the time ran out. He was saved by the bell. Pause. Look at the corner of the ring. The fighter's coach is standing there, watching his man suffer. The coach knows his fighter is beaten. If the fight continues, he will get hurt. The coach wants to surrender, but he can't shout over the noise of the crowd. So he takes the towel he uses to wipe the fighter's face, and he throws it over the ropes into the center of the ring. It is a visible signal of defeat. When we give up on a project or quit a difficult task, we say we are throwing in the towel. Pause. Now imagine a different kind of fight. A sparring match. 2 boxers are practicing. They are friends. They want to practice their speed, but they don't want to hurt each other. So when they throw a punch, they stop their fist just before it makes full impact. They pull their arm back at the last second to reduce the force. They are pulling their punches. When we speak softly to someone, when we criticize them gently instead of harshly, we are doing the same thing. We are pulling our punches. Step down from the ring. Wipe your brow. There is a large sliding iron door on the far wall. It leads outside to the noise of the rail yard. Sound note the gym fades. A sudden rush of steam hiss. The slow rhythmic chugging of a massive locomotive engine. A distant whistle blows, lonely and long. Narrator, step out onto the platform. The ceiling is high and glass-paneled, filled with white smoke. The ground vibrates beneath your feet. We are in the Grand Railway Station. Trains are the great movers of the industrial age. They are powerful, dangerous, and loud. Look at the massive black engine idling on the track. It is building up pressure. The boiler is full of hot steam. If the pressure gets too high, the boiler could explode. So the engineer pulls a lever to open a valve. PHT. A jet of white vapor shoots into the air. The noise is loud, but the danger is past. The engine has released its excess energy. When we are angry or stressed, and we need to vent that emotion before we explode, we say we need to let off steam. Pause. Look down at the tracks. They are parallel steel lines. The train is heavy. It has momentum. As long as it stays on the rails, it is fast and efficient. But if it jumps the track, it becomes a catastrophe. It crashes into the dirt. It destroys everything in its path. When a person loses their mental stability or a project goes completely wrong, we say it has gone off the rails. Pause. Now look at the tracks again. Follow them out of the station. See how the tracks switch. The train can be moving toward its destination, but if a switch is flipped, it is diverted onto a smaller, dead-end piece of track called a siding. The train is stuck there, waiting while other trains pass. It isn't moving forward anymore. It has been sidetracked. Pause. Finally, walk to the edge of the platform and look out at the city surrounding the station. In the 19th century, trains burned coal. They produced thick, black, sooty smoke. In most cities in the northern hemisphere, the wind blows from the west to the east. That meant that the smoke from the trains blew toward the east side of town. The air was dirty. The houses were covered in soot. That was where the poor lived. But the west side, the wind blew the smoke away from it. The air was clean. That was where the rich lived. The tracks were the dividing line. To be poor was to live on the wrong side of the tracks. Sound note, the train noise settles down to a gentle idle. The sound of a station clock ticking, slower and deeper than the house clock. A cello and violin duet begins, slow and melancholic. Narrator, the train is leaving now, but we are not on it. Sit down on the wooden bench in the waiting room. It is warm here. We have played our hand, we have fought our rounds, and we have let off steam. The station is a place of transit, a place between where you were and where you are going. For now, you are simply here, resting in the history of the words you speak. Let the rhythm of the distant wheels lull you. Click-clack, click-clack. The museum is closing for the night. Good night. Sound note, the rhythm of the train wheels slows down until it matches the rhythm of slow breathing, then fades to silence. Here is the final segment of your 3-hour journey. We have traveled through history, industry, and nature. Now we move into the quietest rooms of all, the law office, the library, and finally the bedroom. This segment is designed to be the slowest and most sedative, guiding the listener into sleep. Sound note, the rhythmic chugging of the train fades completely. It is replaced by the sound of a heavy door closing, cutting off all outside noise. Total silence. Then the slow, dry sound of a quill scratching on parchment. Narrator, the noise of the station is behind us. The steam is cleared. We have entered the Hall of Records. The floor here is covered in thick Persian rugs that absorb every footstep. The walls are lined with dark wood paneling. It feels serious here, permanent. There is a sense of order. Everything has a place. Everything is written down. Walk toward the heavy oak desk in the center of the room. A single green lamp glows there. This is the law office. Sound note, the scratching of the quill stops. The sound of a page turning, heavy crackling parchment. A dusty, dry atmosphere. Narrator, in this room, words have power. They decide the fate of kingdoms and commoners. Look at the scroll sitting on the desk. It is an old tax ledger from medieval England. In those days, there was a tax called scot. It was a municipal tax, a payment you owed for living in the town. Most people paid it. But sometimes, for various reasons, perhaps you were a churchman or a noble, you were exempt. You didn't have to pay. You went scot-free. It didn't mean you escaped from a crime. It meant you didn't have to pay the bill. You walked away with your coin purse full, while others paid your share. Today, when someone escapes punishment, we say they got off scot-free. The memory of the tax remains. Pause. Look at the document next to it. It is a proclamation. In 18th century England, if a crowd gathered and became too rowdy, the authorities couldn't just arrest them immediately. By law, a town official had to stand up, unroll a scroll, and read a specific proclamation aloud to the crowd. It was a warning. It said, "Disperse, or we will use force." This document was called the Riot Act. Until the official read it, the soldiers could not move. But once he read it, the clock started ticking. So when a parent warns a child, or a boss warns an employee saying, "I want to read you the Riot Act," they are issuing the final legal warning before the consequences begin. They are reading the Riot Act. Pause. Walk over to the window. It is a narrow, tall window, shaped like a slit. We are in a safe building, like a castle. In the medieval walls, the archers needed a way to shoot arrows out without getting hit. So the builders left vertical slits in the stone. On the outside, the slit was narrow, barely an inch wide. But on the inside, the wall flared out, giving the archer room to move. This architectural gap was called a loophole. It was a way to fire a weapon while staying safe. Over time, lawyers began to look for gaps in contracts, small openings that allowed their clients to escape an obligation while technically following the rules. They found a way out. They found a loophole. The air here is dry and dusty. Let us find a place that smells of vanilla and glue. Sound note, a soft, warm atmosphere. The sound of a ladder rolling along a wooden track. The scent of old paper. A clock ticking very slowly. Narrator, push open the double doors. We are in the library. This is the memory of the world. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves rise up into the shadows. Rolling ladders rest against the shelves. The room smells of leather bindings and the sweet, almond-like scent of aging paper. Walk to the bookbinder's table. There is a book lying open. In the early days of bookmaking, a page was not called a page. It was called a leaf, like the leaf of a tree. When you finished reading one section of the story, or when you finished a lesson, you would take the corner of the paper and turn it over. You would reveal a blank, fresh page. Clean start. No mistakes on it yet. You were turning over a new leaf. Pause. Pick up the letter lying on the desk. It looks like a normal letter, a note from one diplomat to another. But look closely. The handwriting is spaced out. The lines are far apart. Spies and secret agents used to write messages in invisible ink, milk, lemon juice, or chemicals in the white spaces between the visible lines of text. To understand the real meaning, you couldn't just read the black ink. You had to heat the paper. You had to look for what was hidden in the white space. You had to read between the lines. Pause. Now look at the shelf. There is a heavy leather-bound book. It is a Bible or perhaps a law book. It has a ribbon sewn into the binding. When you stop reading, you place the ribbon in the page. You mark your place. But think about the word mark. In the days of archery, a mark was the target. It was the thing you aimed for. When we say something is a benchmark, we are talking about a mark cut into a stone wall by a surveyor to ensure everything else is level. This library is full of marks, benchmarks, bookmarks. It is a place of stillness. But your eyes are getting heavy. The tour is long, and the hour is late. There is one room left, the most private room in the house. Sound note, the library sounds fade. The air becomes incredibly still. The sound of rain gently tapping against the window pane. The strike of a match and the soft hiss of a candle flame. Narrator, walk through the small door hidden behind the bookshelf. We are in the bedroom. The fire in the grate has burned down to glowing red embers. The room is warm. The shadows are soft and flickering. In the center of the room stand a massive four-poster bed. Walk toward it. Look at the mattress. As we saw in the barn, it is a sack filled with hay or straw. But look underneath the mattress. The bed does not have wooden slats. It has a grid of ropes, woven tightly to support the weight of the sleeper. Over time, these ropes would stretch and sag. The bed would become like a hammock, uncomfortable and curved. So before you went to sleep, you would take a wooden key, insert it into the frame, and twist the ropes. You would tighten the net. If the ropes were tight, the bed was flat. You would sleep well. You would sleep tight. Pause. On the bedside table, there is a candle. Before electricity, candles were expensive. They were made of tallow animal fat. They smelled a little when they burned. If you were a worker, you rose when the sun came up, and you slept when the sun went down. You didn't waste candles. But if you were ambitious, or if you were partying too late, you would light a candle to stay awake. And if you woke up early to work again, you would light it again. You were consuming your energy, your wax, twice as fast as nature intended. You were burning the candle at both ends. Pause. But tonight you are not burning the candle. Reach out. Pinch the wick. PFFF. The flame goes out. A thin trail of smoke rises, smelling of comfort. There is a small glass on the table. Drink. Perhaps warm milk or a little brandy. In the old days, people wore nightcaps, long warm hats to keep the heat in while they slept in cold houses. Eventually, the final drink of the evening took the same name. It was the warm thing you finished the day with. Your nightcap. Sound note. The rain continues, gentle and steady. The room is dark. A slow, rhythmic breathing sound, like a sleeper, fades in very subtly. Narrator. The Museum of Words is closing now. The doors are locked. The medieval room is dark. The ship is at anchor. The train is stopped. All the words you have heard, scuttlebutt, loophole, cloud nine, sleep tight, they are all resting now. They have returned to their boxes. You have walked the long hallway of history. Now there is nothing left to do. No more walking. No more learning. Just the bed. The ropes are tight. The hay is soft. The rain is tapping on the glass. You are part of the story now. Close your eyes. Let the words drift away. Sleep tight. Sound note. The rain sound continues for 30 seconds, getting softer and softer until it fades into absolute silence.